Jack is next. DK-1 Blockade and osteosarcoma, considerations for future clinical trials. Hey, Jack.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jack Janett. I am a second-year medical student at Texas A&M. Okay, like I said, my name is Jack Janett. I am a second-year medical student at Texas A&M College of Medicine. And as he said, the title of my presentation is DKK-1 Blockade and Osteosarcoma, Considerations for Future Clinical Trials. And throughout this talk, I'll be summarizing basic science findings and hopefully leveraging these mechanisms to develop a meaningful way for implementing this into the clinical practice. Okay, so as many of you know, osteosarcoma is a fairly aggressive and rare malignant bone tumor, and it mainly affects adolescents, unfortunately, and it can impair their growth. Osteosarcoma is especially lethal because of its likelihood to metastasize, particularly to the lungs. It can also dysregulate numerous cellular pathways, which can negatively impact bone homeostasis and lead to uncontrolled cellular growth. One of these pathways that I just alluded to is the Wnt beta-catenin signaling pathway, which normally differentiates mesenchymal stem cells to osteoblasts for bone development. And as you can see in this photo, normally, if you look at the right pathway, where it says Wnt on, Wnt will bind to a receptor called frizzled, and then activated frizzled and LRP will recruit a signaling protein called disheveled. That's the DVL right there. And this prevents formation of a destruction complex, causing beta-catenin to accumulate in the cytoplasm. And then when it's in the cytoplasm, it will eventually migrate into the nucleus and bind to transcription factors and displace co-repressors, which allows genes to be expressed in develop bone. And so basically, just to summarize, increased Wnt will lead to increased beta-catenin and increased gene expression. However, if you look on the very right where Wnt is off or absent, beta-catenin gets bound to the destruction complex. It's that little middle molecule right there with the GSK3 beta and CK1 alpha. These protein kinases phosphorylate beta-catenin, targeting it for degradation by proteasomes in the cytoplasm, which prevents the expression of certain genes. And I mention all this because, or I guess now that we've kind of gone through and understand it, osteosarcoma secretes a protein, there we go, DKK-1. The full name of it's DKK-1, but we'll just say DKK-1 for simplicity's sake. And DKK-1 is all throughout the body, but it's especially prevalent at these tumor sites of osteosarcoma, and it can inhibit this pathway by binding to LRP. So let's see, hopefully it works. Oh yeah, there it goes. Yep, so it will inhibit this, causing the frizzle to dissociate, and then it will lead to reduced bone formation and increased tumor progression. Okay, so with that in mind, several research groups around the world are currently working on pharmacological approaches that block DKK-1 that affect this pathway. I want to kind of go one by one, like the three main topics I've come across. So one is small molecule inhibitors, which can displace DKK-1 from LRP. Another is nucleic acid inhibitors, which is actually being researched right now at Texas A&M. And this includes antisense oligonucleotides that bind to target RNA, which can block the transcription of RNA into DKK-1. However, in my study, I wanted to focus on biomacromolecules, which include antibodies. Basically, certain DKK-1 antibodies that are being researched right now, as this highlighted one shows, BHQ-880, have been shown to reduce metastasis and limit tumor growth, particularly in prostate and multiple myeloma cancers. So a little bit of a tangent, but as I mentioned before, as you all know, in basic science cancer research, scientists will generate a model, add an agent, and see if the tumor gets smaller. But really, the sequence of events when a patient arrives in the clinic and what actually happens is, much more complicated than that. the question of where to insert certain therapies and the rationale behind that is basically as important as the question of efficacy and how the mechanism works, particularly because efficacy can be, 0 or 100% efficacy based on how you leverage that knowledge and where you implement it into the clinical application. And so as a medical student who I'm interested in bridging the gap between bench to bedside and presenting a broad way of optimizing this impact through a speculative clinical trial. But first, before I get into that, I wanted to mention that there is a research group out there that already conducted a clinical trial of BHQ-880. That's that antibody that I mentioned. But they did it on multiple myeloma, and they found that a large primary osteolytic lesion with high DKK-1 levels were not stabilized when it was inserted, but bone density increased at distal sites where DKK-1 levels were lower. Basically, so what this is suggesting is that DKK-1 antibodies can be used prophylactically to prevent the growth of kind of mini undetectable micrometastases that are distal and away from the primary tumor. And this is probably because they're more manageable with lower levels of DKK-1. So the antibodies can more effectively inhibit them. And since no clinical trials have assessed DKK-1 inhibitors on osteosarcoma, I use this rationale to propose a randomized phase 1b, or it could even be a phase 2 biomarker-driven clinical trial. The ideal patient would have an aggressive primary tumor with high levels of DKK-1, but with no detectable metastases yet. And this would make them the ideal candidate. And then we would then administer standard chemotherapeutic regimens on top of a prophylactic ablation therapy of the antibodies, which, based on the previous study I mentioned, the previous clinical trial, it's speculated that a 28-day dosing regimen of BHQ-880 at doses of somewhere around 10 milligrams per kilogram would probably be the best approach. And then we would evaluate and compare the patient's response via imaging and molecular biomarkers. Some of these biomarkers would include, nuclear beta-catenin, so the amount that gets into the nucleus, osteopontin, which suggests bone differentiation, and DKK-1 serum levels to see if it prevented the spread of metastasis. And if this was successful, and a group goes out there and does something similar to this, this would validate DKK-1 as a clinical biomarker and therapeutic target for osteosarcoma, and hopefully encourage the growth and development of precision targeted therapies for patients with osteosarcoma.
Okay.
My references, and
Thank you.
thank you very much for listening.
I have a reviewer question. Could this be used in combination with other therapies, or how would this impact a trial?
Yes, yeah. So basically what I was promoting was that this would be a good adjunct therapy on top of other standard therapies. So whether it's, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, this would be something on top of what's already standard of practice. But as I said before, this is just speculative in theory, so exactly how it would interact with these other therapies, like you mentioned, is still a little bit up in the air.
Yeah, Dr. Angel, go ahead.
Yeah, very nice talk. Let me ask you a simple question. Are you part of a multi-institutional trial?
No.
Okay, because here's the question. How rare is this entity? How are you getting, because you have to realize within plastic surgery, we're trying to do different research, and the only way to get the answer for something is multi-institutional trials to get the actual. So I think it's great that you're looking into this. But like, for example, how many of these cases does your institution see a year?
Probably not that much.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the problem that's not knocking because no institution, because this is a rare entity. Remember, I was at Johns Hopkins, the University of Virginia. I was at Yale. I see how the whole thing is doing. And I think I applaud you for your interest, but you have to then, with your mentors, talk about, hey, look, who do we need to collaborate with? This just doesn't make sense. And then it's actually your mentors who should be encouraging you this along this way. See, with mentorship, you let the person go on the journey, but you send them where the money is. That's why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. We don't want you wandering in the desert. So you do this sort of, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah. I think I actually got one of my mentors here right now listening to this, but
Yeah,
we did
well,
briefly talk about,
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
and we were briefly talking about how there's labs out there at Albert Einstein and I think MD Anderson that are doing similar basic science research, but the consensus is that there needs to be an importance on translating this into a clinical application.
Oh, yeah.
So
No,
I think there's groups that are interested in it, but like you said, the rarity of it might be one of the main rate determining steps.
Dr. Gregory?
So I don't want to speak for Jack, but I will maybe give Jack a prompt to help him with answering this question. Could you comment on the landscape in Houston and Texas A&M's involvement at the medical complex? And also, I know this might be a little bit off track for you. Do you want to comment on the vet school and how these two relationships might be leveraged?
Nice.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Interesting. Well, I know the research department is there's a culture of collaboration between all the schools. So I know you said the vet school, so maybe there could be a way of implementing this in animal trials that would be, better in terms of going straight into a clinical trial that needs to be a one and done, needs to work. And if not, then it's kind of shut down. But if we collaborate, like you said, with the vet school and did it maybe on animal studies, and maybe would have a little bit more room for cushion.
So do you want to speculate on the best animal for that?
Would it be like mouse models?
But at the vet school,
Okay.
client-owned animals.
Well, also A&M's a big farming school. We have a lot of like cows and horses. Would it be maybe a pig? Pig model?
Turns out dogs.
Oh,
Very
dog.
interesting dogs, and they're born with three and a spare. So these dogs turn up, and you get the limb, so you can apply the treatment, and then you can recover the tissue. But Jack, the landscape in Houston is very fertile for this kind of thing. So if you're really interested in clinical trials, and it seems that you are, then I would look towards Houston, and even collaborations with MD Anderson aren't completely unfeasible. They have their own focus, but also Methodist too, and the Children's Hospital, and that those collaborations are currently being cultivated. So, but I don't. I've said enough.
No, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice talk.
Yeah. Excellent presentation. Excellent, very interesting work. And Dr. Gregory, thank you for weighing in and contributing. Please support our mission to improve quality of patient care through education. Join us, follow us, and share this content with family and friends.